Hammer 1, we're going in. Back us up.
Ready for deployment.
Ammo and weapons upgrades are available.
Hey guys, I'm Prodigy from Airsoft Team Kilo 23. I've said it a million times before, and I'll probably say it another million times. But internals for me come first. Externals come second on an airsoft gun. But how do you know if a gun has quality internals that'll last a while and take a beating? Well, this is where you find out, here on Inside the Mechbox. Today we'll be checking out the G36 RIS to see whether it is worth your money or not. Now, this version of the G36 will run for $170 on airsplat.com. The gun does have a version 3 gearbox, therefore it is completely Tokyo Marui compatible. It will take all aftermarket parts that are designed for the G36 and the version 3 gearbox. So, today we're going to go inside the Mechbox, check out the guts of the gun, and see if it's worth your money or not. The first step in disassembling the G36 is to remove the handguard pin. Simply pop it out. Once that's done, you can remove the RIS system from the gun. After you remove the rail system, you can take out the magazine well pin, as well as the magazine well. From there, you can remove the 2 screws on either side of the gun, just behind the selector switch. One is located here. The other is in the same place on the opposite side. Now, there's a small Allen head screw behind the gearbox that you have to gain access to. But to do that, you have to remove the stock. First step is to remove this long rod here. Holds the stock in place and acts as a hinge for the folding stock. However, this stock does not fold, so the first step is to remove that pin. Once that pin is out, you can literally take the stock off. Now the small pin that you need to remove is just right here. After you remove the hex screw, you can simply roll the gearbox out, but first you have to push the hop up inward and roll the lower receiver out. There's also a small Tamiya connector here that you have to unplug before you can remove the gearbox and lower receiver. Now, the hop-up chamber, as we all know, is responsible for basically the accuracy and flight of the BB. So let's check out all the components in that before we go inside the Mechbox. Now, here we have the 3 main components of the hop-up: the nub, the barrel, and the bucking. The nub is actually very soft. It does not put a lot of backspin on each round. You might want to get a harder nub. The bucking is pretty hard. I actually like it a lot. It's a decent bucking for the speed that the gun is shooting, which is about 350 to 360 feet per second. The hop-up window is actually pretty well cut. It looks very nice. There's no residual metal or scrap laying around. The end of the barrel also has a slight crowning, which is a nice touch. You may have trouble seeing it, but there's a little bit of dirt on the inside of the barrel. I'll have to take a cleaning rod to that before I actually take this gun in a skirmish. Now, let's go ahead and take apart the gearbox. First, we have to take it out of the lower receiver and pistol grip. There's a small pin right here that you have to press out, as well as the large Phillips head screw on the end of the pistol grip. As you're removing the gearbox from the lower receiver, make sure you have your selector on semi-automatic. There's also a small spring just right here where the bolt catch is. Make sure you don't lose that. Whoa! Now we got the Mechbox out of the gun! Let's go ahead and take all the screws out and watch everything fly all over the place. No, I'm just kidding. I'll go ahead and take a few screws out and we'll examine the gearbox as we go. The motor is a standard JG short type motor. Turn the pinion. It turns relatively fast considering, but it does not have a lot of torque. It probably will not pull more than maybe an M120 spring at most. It's also good to note that this gun has approximately 18 gauge wiring. That usually comes in most G36s as it is, so that's alright. Well, now that I've taken out all the screws and everything's flown apart, you guys can go watch another Airsplat video. No, I'm just kidding. Let's check out everything in here. There's a lot to talk about. First, we can check out the spring guide, spring, piston, and piston head. The spring guide is the standard plastic. These do alright. I've only had one break on me, so they work alright. It's got a small metal washer here, so I guess that is good. Just about every plastic spring guide I've seen has a small metal washer there. The spring it comes with is about an M100 power. It is attached to the little lug in here that sits behind the piston head. That also is standard of most Chinese AEGs. The piston is just a regular old kind of yellowish plastic piston. The second to last tooth is not removed, and it does have one steel tooth at the front. The piston head has 5 ports, so that's good. I always like having a ported piston in my gun, so if I want to push higher rates of fire, I can. It has a pretty thick O-ring here. It's got a lot of lubricant on it. I found it's got a really good air seal. I'll demonstrate that in a moment here. The upper portion of the piston has a small cutout here, so I would imagine that's for a blowback feature, maybe in another gun. I've never seen a blowback feature in a JG G36, but I know some other versions have a blowback feature, so they might just be recycling pistons from other guns. Next, let's look at the cylinder head, nozzle, and tappet plate. The gun has a brass cylinder. The port is a little farther back than it usually is, so you could probably install a lower capacity cylinder just slightly and get a higher FPS out of the gun. The cylinder head is plastic, and it's very, very stuck in the cylinder, so you get 0 air leak there, which is a great plus. The nozzle is the standard longer G36 series nozzle. It's got the bar on top, which who knows what that does, it's just there. It has no internal O-ring and seems to get a decent air seal with the cylinder head. The tappet plate for a change is actually pretty strong. That's a good thing. I don't like my tappet plates breaking on me right away. Now, like I said earlier, the cylinder compression gets an excellent air seal. As you can see, I'm pushing pretty hard here and there's no air leak. So whatever spring you put in here, it's going to get a very, very high FPS considering. Now, let's move on and examine the rest of the mechanics of the gearbox. Now, I have gotten JG guns before that have odd gears in them, XYT, other brand gears. These actually say JG on them, so they are officially JG gears. I've always been a fan of JG gears personally. They're made out of pretty good quality steel, and they can take a great beating before they give out. The gearbox stock was actually shimmed pretty well, but if you guys do decide to buy this gun, it could use a little bit of tweaking. I highly recommend shimming it yourself. The sector gear also comes with a built-in sector chip there, just on the right, so if you do decide to go with high rates of fire with a LiPo battery, it will be able to accommodate that. One thing I am never really happy with Chinese guns is the grease they use. This is the brown toothpaste kind of stuff that just smells like fish, and it's really not the greatest. It's very thick, it slows your rate of fire, and it's everywhere it does not need to be. So I highly recommend you guys re-lubricate the gearbox yourself. You can also see here that the gearbox is a 7mm gearbox, and it does include the white nylon bushings. These work alright for the spring power the gun comes with, however, I do highly recommend you upgrade to metal bushings. Now, I have noticed over the past few months that Chinese companies are improving on their trigger switches. The trigger shuttles are looking a lot nicer, the switch assemblies are better aligned, and the measurements on the little metal contacts there are correct. Now, electrically, if you wanted to hook up a LiPo battery to this gun, it could accommodate it for quite a while. Now, as far as upgrades go, I recommend the following 4. The first, I would highly recommend getting some metal bushings. Nylon bushings will work alright stock for a while, but eventually they actually can melt from excessive friction, or they could actually crack. So you never know what could happen. Those could cause a lot of damage if they break. So I really recommend getting metal bushings. As I stated earlier, the cylinder has a little more capacity than it really needs for the 247mm barrel that the gun has. You could probably get away with installing a Type 2 or Type 3 cylinder in this gun. The motor is not a necessary upgrade, but I really wish it had a little more torque. It's got an alright rate of fire on a lithium polymer battery, but to be honest, it could do a little better. Finally, the spring, it gets about 350-360 feet per second, which is good for this style gun. However, I would like to get it up to about 400 for a gun that could actually probably take it. Plus, I don't like springs that are attached to the lug just behind the piston head. Overall, the G36 RIS is actually an alright gun. Could do with a few upgrades and some internal shimming and lubrication, but that's kind of a natural thing with a Chinese gun. It's got my stamp of approval. Thanks for watching, guys. It's been another episode of Inside the Mechbox. Stay tuned for more.